Hey everyone, welcome to the channel that takes you deep inside the San Francisco 49ers. I am your host, Jack Hammer. It is time to discuss the 49ers genius move that they made that put the NFL on notice for years to come. Let's go ahead, let's break it down, let's talk about it again. Thanks to all of you for joining the channel. And again, we're going to be talking about the 49ers genius move that they made just recently that puts the NFL on notice for years to come. Let's get into it. You know, the 49ers yesterday made a big move. They went ahead and they extended the contracts of head coach Kyle Shanahan and general manager John Lynch. Now, how is this a genius move? We're going to get into that. You know, you look at this from a logistical standpoint or a logical standpoint, excuse me. And really what it is, you know, the 49ers, when you look at Kyle Shanahan, you look at John Lynch, the job that they have done together since taking over the San Francisco 49ers football operations in 2017, it's one of the best that we've seen in a very long time. You know, you look at where this team was. This was a team that wasn't very good in 2014. They're 8-8. They were kind of having some internal strife. So they got rid of a coach that was fairly successful, getting to 3 NFC championship games, a Super Bowl during that time, just during a 4-year run. They released them, and they went ahead and they brought in a couple of other guys who just weren't good. Jim Tonsula and Chip Kelly, just not good NFL head coaches. On top of that, Trent Baalke was running the football operations from a personnel perspective, and the team wasn't bringing in solid players either. So it was just a really bad situation. You look at what they've done there. John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan come together in February 2017, and since then, they've completely revamped the 49ers organization. You know, for me, I think when I look at this, I've been around the 49ers almost my entire life, going back to the late 70s, early 80s. I was at Candlestick Park in 1980 for the first time for a 49er game. You know, I was in the stadium in 81 when they beat the New York Giants to secure the NFC West that season before going on to win their first Super Bowl. Was a season ticket holder from 1985 to 2003. I lived the entire run of greatness that the 49ers had in the 80s and early 90s. You know, that's one of the good parts about being an older person doing this is that I got that experience. So I know what it was like to watch that team go through and become the best in the NFL, win 3 Super Bowls in the 80s, 1 in the 90s, compete for championships year over year. And, you know, from there, you know, during that run, you never thought it was going to go away, right? They were so good that was never going to end. But, you know, as I always say, all good things do have an end. The quarterback position, they ran out of luck there. And between that and some poor head coaching choices, just didn't work out. Well, in 2017, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan come in. Since then, the 49ers in the last 4 seasons have been to 3 NFC championship games, won one of those, which got them to the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. On top of that, they've claimed the NFC Western Division title twice. So, you know, they've really turned the organization around. You look at it, over the course of their time in San Francisco, their record is 55-46. They've gone to the playoffs, like I said, 3 times. They're 6-3 there. They've won at least 2 playoff games in each of those seasons. Even more so, I think you need to look at what they've done since 2019. Since 2019, since they figured out the roster, since they got all of their guys in, the 49ers have won 45 games. That's tied for the 4th best in the NFL. Second most in the NFC. And that's even with the 2020 season, which saw them lose their starting quarterback in the second game of the year and have to bounce around with guys like Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard for most of the rest of that season. Jimmy Garoppolo was 500, 3-3, but really without Garoppolo there with the backups that they had at that point, it was a real struggle for the 49ers. And so, you know, beyond that though, like I said, 2019 on, 3 NFC championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, second most wins in the NFC, 4th most in the NFL. And like I said, that's even with a disappointing season in 2020 due to the injuries at quarterback. And so I just think that that's a big thing for the 49ers. This is a huge move. You know, and the reason I think it's a genius move on the San Francisco 49ers part is the continuity that they have just created. You know, there was a lot of talk this offseason, not even this offseason, as far as early as the end of training camp, when the 49ers traded Trey Lance away to the Dallas Cowboys. there was a lot of talk about the 49ers and how bad they missed on that draft, how, Jed York must be frustrated with that because of the money that they spent for a quarterback that didn't pan out. All those first round draft picks that they lost as a result of it. So there was a definite thought that they were in a tough spot. Some would say the hot seat. Whatever you'd like to say. I even myself, I mentioned it at one point in terms of part of the reason why I felt like maybe the discussions with Nick Bosa had been delayed was because maybe Jed York was trying to take a little bit more control of the organization after some of those mistakes that they made. Those types of things, right? So, I made that mistake as well. But this move really shows where the 49ers are in terms of from a football team standpoint. The 49ers are a business overall, right? Let's not forget that. The 49ers, first and foremost, are a business. So the football team is a part of their business. So there's the 49ers business and there's the 49ers football organization. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they run the 49ers football organization. And to have continuity at the top of that organization, what that does is that helps you with bringing in free agents. That helps you with building up the culture that you have. And John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have built a tremendous culture around the 49ers. There's a lot of talk about different things. And the one thing that I'll say is that Kyle Shanahan is a leader of men. John Lynch is a leader of men. And they have two guys that are really strong leaders at the top. And that's why, despite the stuff that you hear from outside the organization regarding the locker room or different types of things, being in that locker room, as I've been able to have the good fortune of doing these last couple of years since they reopened it last year, that 49ers locker room is strong and it's healthy. And if you need any further understanding of why, don't just take it from me, somebody that's been in there. Just take it for what you're seeing. Even in 2020, when this 49ers team was down hard, when they didn't have that quarterback and they were struggling, I don't think there's anybody that can say that 49ers team didn't play hard for Kyle Shanahan, didn't play hard to win games for John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, Robert Saleh, and all those coaches. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you can say when it comes to the 49ers is that Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they've rebuilt this organization. They've rebuilt it in their image, in the way that they want to go out and play football. They know what each other's vision was for the team, and they've gone and they've executed on that. And it's permeated throughout the locker room to the point where everybody just plays hard. The fact that he gets whatever you want to say about Kyle Shanahan and the way that he talks about his quarterbacks or a player or what have you, at the end of the day, everybody on that roster plays full speed all the time, and they don't stop. It's one of the qualities of a good head coach is to have his players playing at a high level as hard as they can at all times. And Kyle Shanahan gets that out of his group. And you look at John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I mentioned this just a second ago. There's a shared vision there. That's one of the things that makes what they've done strong, is that they both have similar philosophies of how they want to go after attacking the football field, the types of players that they have, what they want to have in their players at all these positions. You look at the players I'll go through the players that John Lynch has acquired during his time as the general manager here in a minute. But I think that to say that it's all John Lynch is a little bit inappropriate. I think that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they're together on this. They both have a shared vision, like I said. And I think that Kyle Shanahan, more importantly, he knows exactly what he needs and wants out of every player at every position, whether it's on the offensive line, a defensive end, linebacker, cornerback, safety, quarterback, running back. They know what they're looking for. And it starts with Kyle Shanahan because he's the one on the field with his coaching staff. And then that flows up to John Lynch, who then gets that out to his personnel department. And so building this continuity that you're seeing right now, that is the strength of where you are watching what you're seeing as a 49ers organization. Again, three NFC championship games, one Super Bowl appearance. Strong stuff. And when you look at the players that John Lynch has acquired, just through the draft, I know that we hear a lot about the misses in the draft, but through the draft, he has drafted Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Talanoa Hufanga, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner. That is 5 All-Pros that they drafted since coming here. On top of that, they brought in guys that have made through trade. They traded for Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams, 2 more All-Pros. That brings the number up to 7 All-Pros that they've acquired since taking over the 49ers in 2017. On top of that, you look at their free agents that they've brought in. Kyle Juszczyk, a Pro Bowler multiple times. Javon Hargrave. Javon Kinlaw hasn't reached a Pro Bowl yet. Javon Kinlaw is having a solid season this year after 3 down ones. Javon Hargrave and Kyle Juszczyk, 2 guys that have been to the Pro Bowl that have been brought in through free agency that have been a big piece of their success as well. And then on top of that, you look at some of the late round guys. There's been a number of them, and I'm going to point to 2. Probably, the first one on defense, Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw, just a really solid linebacker, playing next to Fred Warner. Playing next to Fred Warner helps him out a little bit, but also the fact that Greenlaw is just a really nice player of his own right. And then, let's be real. The acquisition of Brock Purdy last year, that's the biggest move that this 49ers organization's made in terms of possibly being able to make it to the Super Bowl and win. The quarterback position has been the one thing when you look around the 49ers organization, you look around the discussion that's been taking place about the 49ers over the course of Kyle Shanahan's tenure. And so much of it has been about his inability to get the quarterback position right. Well, I think, you look at it, they had Jimmy Garoppolo and they liked Jimmy Garoppolo, except for Jimmy Garoppolo just didn't pan out. Jimmy Garoppolo won a lot of games for the 49ers, but he didn't play well in the playoffs. And they got a little bit lucky last year, just like the New England Patriots got lucky back in 2000, I think it was, whatever year it was when they drafted Tom Brady in the 6th round. The 49ers got lucky last year. They drafted Brock Purdy, number 262 overall, the last pick in the draft. And in Brock Purdy, I think that Kyle Shanahan has finally found his quarterback. When you watch the 49ers play, when you watch the film of Brock Purdy, when you really dig into the little things that Brock Purdy is doing on a consistent basis to help that 49ers offense be successful, I think it's very clear that Kyle Shanahan has finally figured out the quarterback position. And I think that's the biggest thing. And you go through and you look at where he is. Like I said, I've watched the 49ers for years and years and years. Growing up, Joe Montana was the dude for me, right? I was just a kid then. But I wanted to be Joe Montana, wanted to be a quarterback, be able to throw it like him, make the plays that he makes, all those kind of things. One of the things that I find very interesting when you compare Kyle Shanahan and to, say, for example, Bill Walsh, right? Bill Walsh set the standard. Bill Walsh is the standard by which every 49er head coach is judged. And, you look at this, and Kyle Shanahan and Bill Walsh have something in common. The guy that they ended up being their quarterback, the guy that ended up giving them the most success at the quarterback position, Joe Montana for Bill Walsh. Right now, I think it's going to be Brock Purdy for Kyle Shanahan. Neither one of these quarterbacks were the first choice of those coaches. Bill Walsh, his first choice in the 1979 draft when he took over the 49ers was not Joe Montana. There was other quarterbacks that he had in mind before Montana. In some ways, you could say he lucked into him, because if it hadn't been for the New York Giants taking Phil Simms where they took him in that draft, Joe Montana never would have been a 49er. Instead, it would have been Phil Simms, because that was the first choice of Bill Walsh. Just like in San Francisco, the first choice for Kyle Shanahan, if you want to believe all the stories, was Kirk Cousins in free agency. It didn't work out. Instead, they got an opportunity to secure a quarterback who they felt like could move them forward in Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo, like I said, won a lot of games for him in the regular season, didn't play well in the postseason, though. And then, they decided that they were going to move on, and they were going to get their guy, and they were going to get him through the draft. And They went out. They gave 3 first-round draft picks to be the number 3 pick in the 2021 draft. They took Trey Lance. That was the guy that they thought was going to be the future. That's the guy they wanted to be the future, and it didn't work out. The next year, they took Brock Purdy. They didn't take Brock Purdy expecting him to be the starter. They didn't take Brock Purdy expecting him to do what he's done so far. They thought he was a nice quarterback. They thought he had some good things about him. They were working really hard on trying to make sure that they could secure him as an undrafted free agent. And at the end of the draft, they decided, instead of allowing another team to come in and swoop up and sign him, that they were going to make the move and they were going to get Brock Purdy. And in securing Brock Purdy as the quarterback of the future for the 49ers, they didn't think that at the time, but that's what he's become. He's won 8 games in a row. He's thrown a touchdown, at least 2 touchdown passes in 7 of his 8 playoff appearances. And on top of that, the combination of Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, they've done something that Joe Montana and Bill Walsh never did. With the game on Thursday night against the Giants, the 49ers scored 30 points for the 6th regular season game in a row. That is the most in franchise history, more than Bill Walsh and Joe Montana. Their best that they ever did was 1984. They scored 30 points or more 5 straight times during that 1984 season that ended up with a Super Bowl. Also in 1992, Kyle Shanahan's father, Mike Shanahan, as the offensive coordinator for the 49ers, was able to help that team do it 5 times as well. But I think it's a little bit more important to point out the success of Bill Walsh because of what he means to the 49ers and how Kyle Shanahan is right there. I look at this franchise now. Again, I say this as somebody who actually watched the teams from 81 on, as somebody who has actually went through it, that right now the 49ers are entering a phase that's on par with where they were from 81 through 90. Those were the teams of the 80s, right? The teams of the 80s, they won 3 Super Bowls. They had multiple NFC championship game bursts. The 81, 84 Super Bowls were great. And then after 84, you had a real drop off, 85, 86, 87. They didn't win a playoff game. They made the playoffs all 3 of those years, won 10 games every year, but they didn't win a playoff game. And that's what led to Bill Walsh retiring after the 1988 season. And then he leaves and they come in and they win 1 more. So they end up with 4 Super Bowls in total. This team right now is at the beginning of that, I think. They had their Super Bowl run in 2019. They just didn't have the quarterback to pull it off. That's one of the things with Brock Purdy. You look at Brock Purdy and we talk about all the negatives around him as what so much of that discussion involves. Well, with Brock Purdy at quarterback, you watch his games in the playoffs, they were nothing like Jimmy Garoppolo. No interceptions, moved the ball, scored a lot of points, over 40 points, I believe, the first one. The second game against the Cowboys, not so much. It was only 19, but he did a good job of managing that game and making big plays to help the offense win. And I think right now, the 49ers, I know that negativity sells, but that's not what I'm going to bring you. This is, again, my channel is Inside the Farms with Jack Hammer because my goal is to take you inside the team. I'm going to make sure that I tell you the negative when there's negative, and I'm going to make sure that I tell you the positive when I think there's things positive. Right now, the team's 3-0, so there's not really a whole lot of negatives to be dwelling on. So that's why we're not talking about it. Looking at this team, looking at the way that they're put together, the San Francisco 49ers right now are one of the, if not the best team in the NFL. Period. Again, look at the names of the players that they have brought in. Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Talanoa Hufanga, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, all pros. Pro Bowlers, Kyle Juszczyk. So got to make sure you juice that like button like Gav says. Javon Hargrave, Brock Purdy, Dre Greenlaw, trading for Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams. One name not on this list, didn't even play in the most recent game for the San Francisco 49ers, Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. Might not be better than Deebo Samuel as a wide receiver. Maybe that's a good argument to have, but he's a very good player and a big piece of what the San Francisco 49ers do. And he didn't even play in the most recent game, and he didn't even get included in my list of guys who they drafted the first time around. But that's how good they were. I think the thing is he has yet to be a Pro Bowler. He hasn't been an All-Pro yet, those types of things. So that's part of it, when you look at those players. But again, the 49ers, they pulled a fast one. It's a genius move, I think, in their part to go ahead and get this extension done. It builds the continuity. We keep hearing about the salary cap problems that are ahead for this team. It's been a discussion over and over again for the last year or two that because of all the top level players that they're not going to be able to keep it together. And so I think going out and signing Lynch and Shanahan to a long-term extension now, what that shows you is that they're in this for the long haul. They're not kicking the can down the road without a plan that means that they're going to be able to overcome some of that, that they feel like they have a plan that's going to be able to keep them successful for a long time. You don't sign a multi-year extension thinking that you're only going to be successful for a couple more years, and then it's all going to hit the fan and you're just going to throw it all away and start over again. That's not the way that this works. You don't sign up to fall down. You're signing up here because you think you can continue this run. And I think if you look at it from an objective standpoint, the San Francisco 49ers under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been built into one of the top teams in the NFL. They show you that week in and week out. They show you that with what they've done in the postseason. They show you that now that they have a quarterback who does things that the 49ers have not had a quarterback do what Brock Purdy's done since, I can't tell you, maybe Steve Young and Joe Montana. I get it's only 8 regular season games, but you look through where you are right now with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy hasn't thrown an interception since, I think it was the game against the Raiders, if I'm correct. I know he hasn't thrown an interception in 190 attempts. I know that. Brock Purdy, you look at his numbers overall this season, no interceptions. He has the 1 turnover when he was sacked and fumbled in his career. Brock Purdy in his career, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Those are his regular season numbers. He has a touchdown percentage of 6.5% and an interception percentage of 1.5. Those are about as good as you can get right there. His yards per attempt, 8.1. He did that last year. He did it again this year. That's where he is so far to start the season off. Very consistent. And that's the thing when you look at Brock Purdy, 67% completion percentage so far this year. Last year, he was at 67.1. There was a lot of discussion around Brock Purdy. Was he a flash in the pan? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He's won his first 8 regular season starts. He still has a ways to go. If he's going to break the record in the NFL, he's barely halfway there. Remember, a lot of the same conversation was had around Tom Brady after the 2001 season. Tom Brady won Super Bowls early in his career. And the discussion around Tom Brady was that he wouldn't have won Super Bowls if it wasn't for the good defense, if it wasn't for Adam Vinatieri, because they had to kick all those Super Bowls were getting won with a field goal at the end of the game. And just take yourself back 20 years. That's the discussion that was being had around Tom Brady at that point. Now, is Brock Purdy going to be Tom Brady? Is he going to win multiple Super Bowls? The future's bright, I think. He stays healthy, and with the offense that Kyle Shanahan has put out there and the roster that John Lynch has given this squad, I think it's possible. It's, obviously Tom Brady went off and did it in Tampa Bay also with a different group, but still had a really good squad around him, had a very strong defense around him. And, look at even Bobby right here. Brady lucked out, though. He wasn't all that in the first few years, mostly a game manager type stuff with a superb defense. That sounds familiar, right? Not taking a shot at Bobby here, but this is what we've heard. This is what we hear over and over and over again when it comes to Brock Purdy. is that he's a product of everybody around him. And to an extent, you're right. And that's the case with every quarterback. Every quarterback that's ever won a Super Bowl, every quarterback that's ever won at a high level, every quarterback that's done those types of things has done it because they've been partly a game manager. They've had a superb defense. They've had great players around them. Joe Montana, like I just said earlier in this show, Joe Montana was my favorite quarterback of all time. It's the guy that I grew up watching. Take a second. Look at the Super Bowl teams that Joe Montana was with. Those defenses were among the best in the NFL year after year after year when they were going to the Super Bowl. The one season where they weren't a top 5 defense was 1988. However, that 1988 season was a little funky. That was the season that they had the whole quarterback thing, and the team just wasn't all there until late in the season. And they made the move to stick with Joe Montana full time. From that point, the 49ers were one of the best defenses in the league. If you go back to the 1988 season and you look at their stats from there was a Monday night game against Washington. Going into that game, the 49ers were 6-5. They were coming off of back-to-back games where they hadn't scored very many points. I think they scored 9 points in Chicago, came home, scored 3 points against the Raiders. They were 6-5. The season was on the brink. They played a Monday night game against the Redskins, blew them out. And from that point on, they ran the table. I think they might have lost the last week of the season because they'd already secured the NFC West by that point. But what I'm getting at is if you look at the defense's performance from that Washington game on, they gave up fewer points per game than the Chicago Bears did in 1986, or 85, that great Bears defense. Right. And so there's that. And Bobby says, I think there have been very few quarterbacks that had this good of a start like Brock Purdy, not just wins, but making clutch throws on third down and just overall decision-making with his reads and handling blitzes. And I agree with you on that one. There haven't been very many. And this is why I say Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they got their guy. Kyle Shanahan didn't get his quarterback until now. I think he's got him. And I think it's funny that when you look at it, Bill Walsh, he didn't want Joe Montana. He wanted Phil Simms. Kyle Shanahan didn't want Brock Purdy. He wanted Trey Lance. He wanted Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And they got lucky. Both of them. These were guys that they liked, but they weren't guys that they were expecting to be guys that were going to take them on a long run. So in terms of what Brock Purdy's been doing, in terms of the third down throws, decision making, his reads, the handling of blitzes, I think that's one of the biggest things, right? And Kyle Shanahan talked about this back in 2021, the need for the quarterback to be able to bail him out when he makes a call and it's not the right one. The defense shows us something different, and we're kind of stuck in a play that's not going to be good. Having the quarterback that can help you out and make that play, that's what we're seeing from Brock Purdy right now. We saw that from Brock Purdy on Thursday night. I think it was third down was the situation. It was either third or second down on the 9-yard line, somewhere right around there, and you get a blitz and he puts the ball, gets it out of his hands and puts the ball right on Ronnie Bell at the sidelines. And Ronnie Bell makes a great catch for a touchdown. Earlier on in the game, I think it was the first quarter, pressure coming, Purdy slides away from the pressure and drops the ball right over a defender to George Kittle for a big gain. Just, you see these kind of things, and it's not something that's just a flash in the pan. It's every game you're seeing this. Go back and watch the game against Pittsburgh. There's examples of this. Go back and watch the game against the Rams. There's examples of this. For case in point, the throw that he makes to Jauan Jennings, there's one that I highlighted on the channel where Jennings is running an in. The ball, he ends up having to spin around and catch it, but that's because Purdy's got pressure. He's got a free runner at him. He slides, gets the ball out of his hands. Jauan Jennings runs 5 more yards up before he makes his in cut. From the time that Purdy starts to throw the ball and it starts to come out of his hand, that's how much ground he's traveling. And that's Purdy understanding where his guy's going to go, knowing where the hole is in the defense, and giving his guy a chance. And that's not what anything the 49ers have had in the past. They had it at times with Jimmy Garoppolo. Sometimes they didn't have it with Trey Lance. They didn't have that at all. But this is what the kind of stuff you're seeing. Joe Montana could pull this off back in his day. Steve Young did this kind of stuff. Is Brock Purdy a guy that's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback? I don't know. If he continues on the path that he's on right now, I think you need to watch out. Sarah, the domestic goddess, member of the Toolbox, says, watching Cool under pressure, I saw so many parallels between Joe and Brock. My husband and I both said that the whole docuseries. Yeah, and if you haven't seen that, if you haven't watched it, I know it's been out for a couple of years. I just watched it this last offseason. I missed it when it originally came out. Just was busy at the time, and I started watching it this offseason before. There was nothing on. I figured I needed to watch some football stuff, so I put that on. And the Cool Under Pressure documentary with Joe Montana, showing all of the things that he went through. And yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Joe and Brock, from, the fact that I think, Joe Montana was always the underdog. At Notre Dame, he had to fight for the opportunity to get in. And it just was one of those crazy things that every time Joe Montana played for Notre Dame, they won. And they'd come back and they were successful. Yet the coach kept going with somebody else. Brock Purdy was a guy who, that's not the way his college career went. Brock Purdy went in and he completely turned around Iowa State. The 49ers have talked about this a lot, about talking with Matt Campbell, the head coach at Iowa State, and how I think it was Bobby Slowick was the area scout. I know it was a Slowick, and he was the area scout for Iowa, and would go through Iowa State. And he would kept coming back talking about Brock Purdy, and how Matt Campbell talked about Brock Purdy's ability and how he changed the entire culture of that university's football program. And the 49ers, eventually bought in, and you're seeing that now. You hear it from the guys. You hear it from the players. Don't take it from me. Don't even take it from Kyle Shanahan if you don't want to, or John Lynch. Listen to what the guys are saying. Listen to what Trent Williams is saying about how Brock Purdy came in and told them all to basically told them to shut up, because they were, talking in the huddle, what have you. Yeah. And then I'll say this too. I think one of my favorite parallels between Joe and Brock Purdy, and they talk a lot of shit. They do. Joe Montana, it's the famous one, was the NFC Championship game in 1981. He makes the throw that ends up being the catch. He's on the ground. Ed Too Tall Jones, as he's getting up, says, "Man, you just beat America's team, or you just knocked America's team out of the Super Bowl, or you just beat America's team," is what he said. And Joe Montana says, "Well, you can watch the Super Bowl with the rest of America." Right? There's a number of highlights of Joe Montana making big plays where you can see him talking to the defenders, talking smack. Go back to the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals. He throws a touchdown pass to Jerry Rice, and you can see him turn and scream at the Cincinnati sidelines. We see this with Brock Purdy all the time. Brock Purdy he makes his play and he's pointing to his, to his arm, what have you, cold as ice, all that kind of stuff. Week one, all the talk from Patrick Peterson. Brock Purdy's asked about it at the podium, and he's talking about the deep throw that he made to Brandon Ayuk for the touchdown, and he kind of just gets a little grin on his face and asks the reporter, "Was that Patrick Peterson covering that?" That kind of stuff. It's in him, and I think that's the other part too. They're very similar. Joe Montana. One thing they don't have in common is Joe Montana's had little bird legs. Brock Purdy's got big old thighs. He's a much bigger dude in terms of his the strength in his legs, right? But Joe Montana wasn't 6'2", 6'3". He wasn't that big dude. If you ever stood next to Joe Montana, he wasn't, a big old guy. Neither was Steve Young. Both these guys were a little on the shorter side, but they're just good ball players. And Bobby says, Quadzilla Jr. That's right. You got or you call him the Quad Father. I think that was one that Greg Gascon used to call Nick Bosa the Quad Father. I think that's where I saw it the first time. Brock Purdy's kind of like that. Greg says that Purdy reminds me of a cat quick Tom Brady. Yeah, there's a lot of that too. But again, like I said, this show is about the genius move the San Francisco 49ers made. And I do think that with the extension of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan for the 49ers, this was a genius move, because Kyle Shanahan, make no doubt about it, is one of the best, if not the best play caller in the NFL. That's why his offense is being run all across the league by many of the top offensive teams in the NFL. And even if it's not his offense, everybody's using pieces of it. And they're all kind of using pieces of each other's. But the other thing, and I think when you talk about Kyle Shanahan, how good he is as an offensive play caller, I think that the thing that's missed so much is the leader that he is. And again, I talked about this earlier, the leader and his ability to get guys to play hard for him over and over again with regularity. He gets guys to play for him. And I think that's it. The 49ers, they have continuity now at the top of their football organization. Somebody asked me over here, I got to get to it because he paid some money. So I got to get my guy, Shane. Shane says, Jack, what do you think this means for Adam Peters in your opinion? Okay, this is a good question because Adam Peters is a highly thought of personnel person in the NFL, somebody who has been up for many general manager positions, open positions. And, I don't think that this came out of the blue. Adam Peters had opportunities last year and stayed in San Francisco. I think that there's a possibility that he's going to leave. I think Adam Peters is the guy that, he's going to leave when the time is right for him. If he gets a really good offer with a solid organization, I think he would take it if he feels like it's a good spot. I think part of the reason why he hasn't done it to this point is it just hasn't been the right spot. You listen to everybody, but you don't necessarily need to pull the trigger on everything. So I think that's part of it. Greg over here makes a really good point. Shane says it's all up to Peters' wife. I agree with that too. Adam Peters is a Bay Area guy. Adam Peters grew up in the Bay Area. So it's not like, he was a Bay Area guy. He went to school at UCLA, kind of a California kid. And depending on the situation in San Francisco, they're tied in for a while here with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Maybe Adam Peters is really happy with where he is in his career in terms of what he's doing. Maybe he feels this is what he wants to do. Who knows? Everybody has that competitive streak about how they want to always be the top guy. Maybe for Adam Peters, being the top guy is getting to where he is right now and being a multi-time Super Bowl champion with the 49ers or winning a Super Bowl this year and getting a good opportunity with a franchise that really has an opportunity to succeed and has ownership that's going to allow him to do the things that he feels are necessary to win. I think that's the other thing too, right? When you're going for these jobs, that's one of the reasons, Robert Saleh and his move out to the Jets was, that's a tough organization. They've really struggled. Their ownership is a little interesting. They have their general manager in place, and how much do they work? You're seeing it with DeMeco Ryans in Houston now. We'll see if how they are able to turn around if they can. So, anytime you make those moves, you got to make sure that it's in the right spot. So, I think at some point Peters will probably leave, but for now, I don't know. I think he'll be okay. Jimbo, this is a good one. Yeah, Gav, that's right. It was a great question, Shane. I appreciate that one. And I don't know if there was another one that you threw at me after that you didn't pay for, but no, that was a good one. And I think this is an interesting one, is because Ben Roethlisberger reeled off a bunch as a rookie and then won the Super Bowl. If you remember, Ben Roethlisberger, I think he won 13 games in a row his rookie season. They got to the NFC Championship game and they lost. Sounds very similar, right? I mean, I know that Brock Purdy only played 5 regular season games, but he got those guys to the NFC Championship game before losing. It was a little bit different situation. He wasn't able to stay healthy. I think if he stays healthy, that game's a lot different. But I think when you talk about Ben Roethlisberger here and all that he did as a rookie, I think it's important to realize that not only did he reel off a bunch of wins and almost get to the Super Bowl as a rookie, got to the AFC Championship game, he came back the next year and won the Super Bowl. The next year, they got to the Super Bowl, and that's where they beat the Seattle Seahawks. So it's not like all these guys are. That's the other thing that we've heard about so much when it comes to Brock Purdy, is that it was just a small sample size. I think we need to do a better job of not allowing past problems impact the way that we look at future players. Jimmy Garoppolo, he had a lot of success in 2017. And I don't think the 49ers jumped the gun with making him the quarterback that they made him in terms of the pay. I think they did a smart thing there. It's not like they broke the bank. Yeah, he was the highest paid quarterback at that time, but they were going to pay him. The average annual value of that contract was right around what it was going to cost them to sign him if they just used the franchise tag on him. It all worked out, I think, the way that it should. And with Brock Purdy here, you've got a guy that really leads this team. So again, like I said, to open up the show, 49ers making a genius move here, keeping the continuity of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch together. And then the other piece of this is all the players that they've brought in. And again, just let me reel off the names of the players that they've brought in since 2017. Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Talanoa Hufanga, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. Those are all guys that have become all pros. On top of that, Kyle Juszczyk, Javon Hargrave. Those are guys that have been in the Pro Bowl that they've brought in. And on top of that, Dre Greenlaw, a solid linebacker. Brandon Ayuk, a tremendous wide receiver. And the guy that we spend a lot of time talking about in the show, Brock Purdy at quarterback, the most important position at the end of the day on your team. If you have a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over, you're going to win a lot of games. And they've brought in a lot of guys. Kyle Shanahan has found the quarterback that he needed. I think he's found his quarterback, just like Bill Walsh found his quarterback. The difference is Bill Walsh found his quarterback in year one. It took a few years for Kyle Shanahan to find that guy that really, really is the guy that he needs moving forward in Brock Purdy. So there you have it. Thank you all so much for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed the show as well. Greg Escon says Purdy's character is what separates him from most. His character, his leadership, his ability to be cool under pressure, his ability to just in some ways be the heartbeat of the team, because he makes plays when things aren't perfect around him. He's all those kind of things. And I think there's so much about Brock Purdy that I think makes him, separates him from everyone when it comes to the quarterbacks. And it really is positive to see. The 49ers are in a really good spot moving forward right now, 3-0 on the season. They should be 4-0 heading into one of their biggest games of the regular season against the Dallas Cowboys. Again, it's going to be the game against the Cowboys. It's going to be a game against the Eagles. That's going to let us know where they're going to be, I think, in terms of the NFC playoff picture. But I think this is a 15-win team, at least this season. I really do. They just have so much depth. They have so much talent. They have a quarterback that's playing at a high level. They have a head coach that knows what he's doing. They have a defensive coordinator that's a leader of men, that's been around the block, that's getting his feet under him. This is a strong 49ers football team. They are in a good spot under Kyle Shanahan, under John Lynch, leading their football organization. And with that extension that those two men received yesterday, the 49ers have put the NFL on notice for many years to come. So thank you all so much for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate it. If you can do me a favor, hit that like button. Once you're done with hitting the like button, if you're watching this, you're not already a subscriber of the channel, subscribe to the channel. Maybe even become a member. Members always get their questions, their comments brought up. They also get them answered if it's a good question. So make sure that if you like what you're seeing, you subscribe, maybe become a member. And then last but not least, turn on your notifications. You're not going to want to miss any of the updates right here on Inside the Farms with Jack Hammer. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you for making the time to watch. Have a good rest of your Saturday. I'll be back soon. Take care, everybody.